Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help ambitious private practitioners across the globe to brand themselves and grow their dream practices. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building ninja tips. Visit privatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and our signature marketing e-course. Here are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Campbell and Katie Lemieux.
Hey there, Startup Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. We are super excited that you're here. And today's guest is going to be talking to us and you about a topic that you requested. And the topic is the 3 money realms of private practice. And who we're going to be interviewing today is Deb Lyman. She's an LCSW therapist, clinical supervisor, consultant in private practice in Oakland, California. She loves helping early and mid-career therapists develop more confidence with both their clinical and business sides of their practices, particularly when it comes to issues of fees and the frame. She'll help you think more deeply about the clinical implications of your business decisions and business implications of your clinical decisions. Welcome, Deb. How are you?
I am good. How are you both?
We are good. Little anxious as we prepare for this major hurricane coming, but yes, we are good other than that. It's actually good to be here. I know that a lot of times for me, sometimes when life is going on, just being with clients allows me to refocus. So I'm looking forward to this podcast with you and chatting about a topic that we really love to talk about. But before we jump in, we wanted to remind you, if you did not listen to last week's podcast, you're going to want to make sure you listen to it after you listen to this podcast, because we had the awesome pleasure of interviewing Mike Michalowicz again. And if you guys know Mike, you probably know that he is author of Profit First. He came back to talk to us and you about clockwork, on how to make your business run like clockwork. And if you are a new timer here, we want to welcome you into the Startup Nation family. And we have a gift for you because you are our VIP. And that is our A to Z cheat sheet, the essentials for building and growing your dream practice. You can head over to privatepracticestartup.com, head over to the resources section, and there you'll see it. And we'll come with 5 days of practice building emails. And that's just our gift to you and really wanting to support you with where you're at in your private practice. And of course, if you're a longtime listener, thanks and welcome back. So let's dive into today's topic. How did you start wanting to talk about money and help therapists around money?
Well, basically from messing it up initially myself, right? As we often do. Like that's how, we learn something and then we want to pass those lessons on to other people so they can make new and different mistakes. So, I started my practice and I was told, it takes however many years to build up a private full practice, and kind of a lot of fear-based messages about money initially, like a lot of limiting things. But right around that mark that I was told, like, this is when you would get your practice going, was then the Great Recession hit. So it was really motivating for me to actually take a lot more ownership of and learn a lot more about business and building businesses and marketing and fees and money. Because initially, I do a lot of supervising also. So some of that was as I was doing more supervising, I was seeing all of the up and coming therapists starting their practices, struggling with the same stuff I'd struggled with too. So kind of being the perpetual big sister, I feel like.
Tell us a little bit
on what I learned, and so you can make new and different mistakes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience of starting up your private practice just as the recession was hitting. How did that affect you?
Well, it didn't help at all with my scarcity mentality, which I really had. And that fear of, I'll get into this a little bit when I talk about the personal realm and your own money stories, but it's like I had all those beliefs of what was possible, what was okay to ask for, and the recession just, turned up the volume on all of that. Like, oh no, it's not okay to charge. Oh no, nobody's going to want to come see me. Agreeing to things that I don't think actually were beneficial to my business or clinically beneficial, but that were really based out of fear. So, for example, when I set my fee initially, the fee I chose was initially one that I was like, okay, let me look on Psychology Today and see what everybody else is charging. Let me see what my supervisor is charging. Let me see what people with less experience than me are charging. And let me try and land on something that won't upset anybody. Wow. Right? So not the way to do it. Like there was no math involved in that at all. Right. It was completely emotional. So
I would love for you to share, Deb, like you said, there was no math in that involved. And so interestingly enough is that we have a video series called Level Up, and they're quick, short videos, like 6 to 10 minutes, answering Startup Nation's questions. And one of the things is we just recently answered, I think twice. It was a question that was similar, but in a different way. And many of the same things that you're talking about is like doing the market research and looking around and trying to figure out, where do I land? How do you do your math in regards to figuring out what your fee should be?
Well, what I tell everybody I work with now is you have to do the math. You have to figure out what your expenses are. You have to figure out, what your business expenses are, what your personal expenses are, what you need to make from the practice, and then divide that number, add in the cushion for taxes, and get the number that you need to gross. And then divide that by the number of sessions you're planning on doing. And that's got to be your average fee, right? The average fee. So if you're going to slide at all, if you're going to take insurance at all that reimburses at a lower rate, you need your full fee, in quotes, to compensate for that. And then, so I'll have people go through the whole worksheet with figuring out all their expenses, doing all the math of that. And then it's, okay, what goes through your body? What goes through your mind? What emotions come up when you see that number?
Nice. I like that aspect.
For a lot of people, it's, oh, crap, right? Or, oh, no, I can't dare charge that. Or, occasionally it's, oh, okay, that's doable. But inevitably, there's an emotional response to that.
Totally. And we really like to add in is to also think about the time that you want to take off, the amount of weeks, plan for sick time, how much do you want to save for retirement? Those things are really essential. One of the things as a business owner and growing into a business owner, especially because of all of our learning and understanding and doing marketing. And so marketing, they always talk about like reverse engineering the funnel, right? Or reverse engineering this message. And interestingly enough, I find like when you come into business, you don't have much experience, is like you look down and you're like, I need a business name. Okay, let me pull that out of the hat. And you look down again, you're like, yeah, I need an office. But really when you're talking about fees, that reverse engineering idea comes back up. It's like, okay, like let's look at a year time span and then let's work backwards.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That was not at all how I had done it initially.
And so you can see there.
right. Because we don't get business. It's so great what you both offer because we don't get that sort of business training. And certainly thinking about money in my clinical education, we were encouraged to reflect on our own thoughts and feelings and histories with sex and with substances and with food and all sorts of stuff, but not money.
True.
Yeah, and as clinicians, we're focused on the care of our clients. And when we are actually stating our fee and putting our needs first and putting that out there, like you were talking about earlier, not wanting to upset the clients, that's something that a lot of clinicians struggle with. I can remember feeling that when I had first stated my fee when I first started out over a decade ago. And I felt like icky and like dirty, like asking to be paid for sessions. Like it was this, I don't know, shameful thing. And that was something that took me quite some time to get past. And I know a lot of therapists have issues with money. And if you don't examine your relationship with money and really take a look at that, it will definitely wreak havoc in your business for sure. What are some of the ways that you help therapists to really examine their relationships with money?
Well, just as you were talking about that, I thought, that this is why I have this kind of way that I conceptualize money in private practice with these 3 realms of private practice, which actually are kind of 4 realms that we've got the business realm, right? All of that, the reverse engineering the fee, looking at the profit and loss statements, figuring out your systems of how you're going to track the ways that money flows in and out of your business, how you're going to do billing, whether or not you're going to take insurance, all of those very concrete pieces. Profit first, which I think is a great system in terms of tracking how money flows in and out of your business. There's that business realm. And then there's the clinical realm, right? What you're saying is you had your own fears of what the client are going to hear when I say my fee, but your client's got their own relationship to money, and not just money, but what it means to be paying money to get help, what it means to be depending on a therapist, what it means to be vulnerable in this way, like all of this symbolic pieces of what money means, both for them, for you, and between the two of you. Because it can mean so much. It can mean power. It can mean freedom. It can mean an expression of love. It can mean, all realm of things, all manner of things. So there's all of that going on, the symbolic. And then there's the personal, right? Our own money stories, all of what we're bringing to it, all of our own biases, all of our own fears. And that is so super important to think about, because the places where the business and the clinical overlap, both of those are being completely influenced by your own money story. Mm-hmm. And then that whole thing is taking place, in this cultural context at a particular time, whether it's at a recession or thinking about the reality of income inequality, or, depending on geographically where you're at, what might be happening economically in the local economy, the impacts of, what populations had access to wealth and passing on wealth and who has not. Like, all that's also in the background. So it gets overwhelming. It gets super complicated to think about all those things.
Nice. How about before we dive in, I just want to take a quick break for our sponsor.
If you're in private practice, you wear a lot of hats, and some of those hats are totally great, but some, like filing taxes and running payroll, for example, not so great. That's where Gusto comes in. They make payroll, taxes, and HR actually easy for small businesses like your private practice. Fast, simple payroll processing and benefits and expert HR support all in one place. Gusto automatically pays and files your federal, state, and local taxes so you don't have to worry about it. Plus, they make it easy for you to add on health benefits and even 401ks for you and your team. Let them wear one of your many hats. You have so many better things to do with your time. Listeners get 3 months free when they run their first payroll. Try a demo and see for yourself at gusto.com/PPS. That's gusto.com/PPS. There are so many ways to keep your practice organized, but Therapy Notes is by far the best. Their easy-to-use, secure platform lets you not only do billing, scheduling, and progress notes, but also create a client portal to share documents and request signatures. Plus, they offer amazing unlimited phone support. So when you have a question, they're there so you can get help fast. Get started with Therapy Notes today, trusted by over 60,000 professionals. Go to therapynotes.com and enter promo code PPS, as in Private Practice Startup, and you'll get 2 months for free. Also, you can listen to episode 54, where we interviewed Brad Pliner and took an in-depth view into their EHR.
All right, let's dive into those 3 realms.
All right. So the business stuff, I think, is, all the pieces that you help out so much with, which is, the structures, the systems, all of that. But what I really wanted to focus on was you're mentioning, Katie, that there's that we get afraid to bring those conversations up, that we get afraid that if we bring our need into the room, it's going to be, somehow freak the client out, they're going to leave. And so out of our own fears, we avoid those conversations. Mm-hmm. And so the thing I would really most want people to take away is that if you really know your own money story, know your own relationship to money really well, where you get stuck, where you have conflicting messages, that is going to really help you have more confidence in being able to lean into those conversations with your clients and then be able to drop things deeper and drop things into that symbolic realm, right? Because you won't be so preoccupied with your own anxieties, or at least you'll kind of know where the landmines are.
Give us a little example about that. Like, what questions do you have people ask themselves or explore?
Around their own money history? So many things. Like, there's a ton of different factors that influence your money story. So kind of gender, like what messages did you receive if you grew up socialized female about money and your capacity to earn? What, based on your social location, your class background, what messages did you receive about money? Was there enough money? What was money? What was the kind of symbolic representation of money in your family? Like, if there was a fight, was it like, let's make it better, I'll buy you something?
Right. Or like conditional, like feeling like there's strings attached.
Right. Exactly.
Or you had in my family, I felt like I had to earn everything, right? Like I did get good grades, but when I got good grades, I would get money, or like, oh, if you want the car, then if you do this, or my dad. And it's interesting because it's like, I appreciate my dad now because I appreciate him, but appreciate a lot of what he's instilled in us. And then also there was some money messages that really weren't helpful. I know that my biggest money tape is you have to work hard to make money. And that definitely came from, always had to be some type of exchange to make money. And that's really not true. So I've had to work somewhat hard at undoing a lot of those things.
And for me, what comes up is I have always been like a spender historically. And the belief underlying that is I work hard, I deserve this. And I work so hard, and I've worked since I was like 13 years old, and I have a really strong work ethic. That'll never change. But I had to really work on that mentality of not spending so much. And after marrying my husband over a decade ago, he's very much a saver. And so we've balanced each other out, and it's a really nice, sweet balance there. So I've been able to kind of let go of some of those things. But yeah, it's so fascinating when you really examine those belief systems and how they inform our decisions.
Yeah, we can do probably a whole other series of podcasts on couples and money, right?
Yeah.
Money stories, and you probably see it all the time clinically around money and sex. Those are the things people have a hard time with.
The hot topics.
Yep. So starting to ask about that, if there were any significant incidents in your family of origin, if there was a bankruptcy, if there was some sort of, if one of the family members had a gambling problem, if money came and went, if there was scarcity, getting a sense of the cultural messages around money. We're kind of obsessed with money in this culture. So just seeing that there's so many messages we get around that our value is connected to how much we make or how much we charge, right?
Right.
Which I think also is like, that's got to get really separated when we're talking about our clinical work. Because, I ultimately think that most people are paying too much for therapy, and all therapists are getting underpaid, like, at the same time. There's that inherent tension. So, it's not really about, am I worth X number of dollars for my fee? It's, the fee is, you figure out the fee with the math, and then the clinical richness comes from exploring all of the emotions that get tied to that, and digging in and seeing like what it really represents to you, and having to kind of sit with the tension of the concrete piece.
Talk a little bit more about like what you just said about therapists charging a high fee and then clients. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what you just said. There's this like contradiction in how that it's charged, but what we're paying for therapy. Share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I think we do such important work that it's this idea of like, am I worth $200 a session? Am I worth $150 a session? Like, absolutely, we're all worth getting well compensated for the work that we do and being valued for our skills and what we are, the gifts that we bring to the community. We're all worth that. That really has nothing to do in some ways with what you're ultimately going to charge.
Gotcha.
Right? It's, and that tension of, I think often there's a wish of, I could think in my own history, it's like so many people come in, they don't want to have to be paying for therapy, right? They wanted things to have gone differently early on so that they wouldn't be needing therapy in the first place. Mm-hmm. So there's always a little bit of that. Even though I think lots of people come in and they really value the work and they, don't have a problem paying with it. At the same time, on another level, there's that place of, I'm here because in some way I didn't get what I needed.
Right.
And now I've got to pay for it.
Right.
And there's something about that like we all wish that we didn't have to do that.
Sure. Like if you're going through a divorce or something, like, here we are, I need this, but then having to pay for high attorney fees and stuff like that. So just kind of looking at from the perspective of the clients, the consumer, and that relationship of, it's a lot different when we are working towards something and we want to go on this dream vacation and we've been paying for it and there's all these good emotions attached to it is kind of what you're saying. But when there's an emotional component that's negative of like handing over the money, there's another, I hear what you're saying about the tension that's created there.
Right. Or just even earlier than that that we all have this wish that we could have gotten all of our needs met as children. And to the degree that we didn't, we may find ourselves seeking out a relationship with a therapist to address some of those things. Yeah. And so, that's always there. Like, I wish you would see me for free, and I wish I didn't need you.
Sure.
Right.
Now you've talked about the two different realms, the business realm, the clinical realm. What's the third realm?
The personal. The personal.
Okay.
That's like, right. So the business and clinical, they're going to overlap, especially around things like fee, cancellation policies, charging for missed sessions, all of that sort of stuff. And then the personal is influencing all of that, right? An example of the personal influencing the business was, when I first started, I had all those messages of it's not okay to need and it's not really quite okay to be ambitious, or if you are ambitious, you'll be envied and other people won't like you and it'll hurt your relationships. Like all of that stuff was completely connected to the business decisions I was making.
I see this diagram, like a Venn diagram with those three circles and that sweet spot right in the middle. What advice do you have for people who really want to nail in that sweet spot?
What do you mean nail in that sweet spot?
Really explore the sweet spot, like where those three sections all intersect. What advice do you have for clinicians and how they can really explore that area?
Well, first thing I think is, knowing your own stuff, right? You wouldn't enter into a conversation about sex or substance use with clients really if you hadn't done some of your own self-exploration around what are you bringing to that conversation, where you get caught up, where are your biases, right? So same thing with money. You've got to first kind of know where you're coming from so you can make sense of your countertransference and know, is this my stuff or is this something that that needs to be explored in the relationship with the client? Mm-hmm. So first thing is that. Second is, I think, being willing to have things be a little messy for a while. For example, a conversation about fee or somebody's possible resistance to paying a certain fee. If somebody's really erring on the business side, they may just come with like that. The fee is the fee. That's the fee. Like it or don't. You could see me or you could see someone else. Right. And there's validity in that, but something gets missed, right? If you're leaning really heavily on the clinical side, it might be, okay, well, what fee feels comfortable for you and what can you do on a weekly basis? And let's talk about it and let me be understanding. And you may forget to check like, okay, can I afford to make those accommodations? Mm-hmm. That's going to be a big problem too. Being in that sweet spot is being able to hold like the tension, I think, of there's a reality that the therapist has their own needs. And at the same time, this is meaningful in both concrete and symbolic ways for the client. And if we can hold the anxiety about that a little bit and get really curious and compassionate, I think that can deepen so much. I can't tell you how many amazing conversations I've had with people about what it meant that I was whatever willing to discuss the possibility of a fee reduction, whether or not I actually offered it, but to hear more about what it meant for them. Not just what it meant for their bank account and what they can afford, but for example, thinking about somebody who had their own thing where everything was conditional. So there was a lot of figuring out, like a lot of fear of knowing they did need the reduced fee, but they didn't want to ask for the reduced fee because they were sort of expecting that some strings would be attached. Mm. And so for us to get into like what was the right fee that was like enough of a stretch for them that they didn't feel like they would then need to leave out a lot of stuff from the therapy, leave out their aggression, leave out negative feelings, leave out something because then they had to be nice to me.
Interesting.
Because they were getting the reduction.
Yeah, I've never thought about that aspect. And of course, as you're talking, like all of a sudden, all these like ideas and examples kind of come up for me. And, I think part of it, and I can see like how the three realms all of a sudden work together, right? So I've had a client that I've seen on and off for about 7 years. And I've kept her fee kind of much lower than my regular fee. And it was like kind of like a self-check thing. Like, can I do this? Yes, absolutely. Do I want to do this? Yes, because I enjoy her. I've seen her progress. I'm invested in her as much as she's invested in this. And it feels good to do that, right? So I can see the self-exploration in regards to when we do that and all of a sudden if it doesn't feel good to us and then we feel obligated and then that's not, and then I've even have to ask myself, like, if I do this, am I going to like start to resent the client?
Right. Oh, and if you do,
don't do it.
Don't do it.
It's not good.
Really, really bad for the therapy.
Yeah, really, totally.
They're not going to get good therapy if there's some way that you're resenting them or then expecting them to not show up with their symptoms or be gratifying in some other kind of way.
Right.
Right. Because you're ultimately not taking care of yourself.
Right. And some of the things that I know that we have done suggested to, people that we talk to is, sometimes there's life situations that happen. Maybe someone lose a job or they're getting a divorce or whatever. And to really examine those things and look at that. And maybe you do offer a reduced fee for a certain amount of sessions or a certain amount of time. And that's really helpful. I know I've learned to, and I know Kate does this too, on the initial call, because you're right, is that a lot of times people come up with their own money stuff. So you've had this really good initial call of a potential client. They seem like they really like you, and you get to the fee conversation. And then sometimes they'll say, well, I'll check and let me call you back. To me, I always wonder, like, is it a money issue? Is it something else? So I've learned to just kind of outright ask. And the question I usually say is, was that what you were expecting? Mm-hmm. And that allows us to have a conversation further, because for me, ultimately, if my fee is too high for them, I want to know so I can actually continue to support them and point them in the right direction. And I think it does take something to be okay with ourselves to be able to ask that question, because now we have to talk about money, and that's not always so comfortable. But I see it more as a gift, because if I can continue to support you and point you to someone who I know can help you, that I think is a good quality therapist for your needs, then that's a gift for me to be able to do that for you.
Right. Well, and there's so many places that could go if you're able to ask that question of like, oh, what comes up for you when you hear me say that number? Is that what you were expecting? Where is that? There's so many places that can go. It may lead to, okay, let me find somebody that's going to be a better match that's really out of my range. It may be something where you could hear like, maybe they can afford it, but there's some discomfort. And in those cases, I really want to try and, if possible, get somebody in the room at least for a first session so we can explore a little bit of, okay, what does it mean for you to be investing in this way and investing in yourself in this way?
Gotcha.
Because
so you even
that they can financially do it, but it's so uncomfortable. And if that can get in the room, then then we have a different conversation. Or then maybe my fee is something that they could stretch, or maybe there's a little wiggle room, that we can adjust a little bit that feels like the right number, where it's a stretch for them, but not so much of a stretch for them that they collapse and have to leave, and not so much of a stretch for me that I am setting myself up to feel resentful or is something I really can't do. But if you're not comfortable, if you don't know your own money story and haven't worked with some of that and aren't comfortable, if somebody says, oh, no, I'll get back to you, your response is more likely to be, oh, okay, sorry, bye. Right. If you're feeling like that was an okay thing to ask for, or if you aren't okay with the fact that you can have that and it's not going to work for everybody, or they're going to have whatever kind of emotional reaction they have to it, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're bad for charging what you charge. It means money's super evocative for everybody, and we're all going to have feelings about it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm enjoying the conversation really, like as you talk about exploring the business realm. So that's the systems, the tracking, the billing, the profit loss. You talk about the clinical realm, the symbolic meaning of money, and the personal realm, really examining your own story. Deb, what do you hope that people take away from your message today?
What I hope people take away is that this is an area that can be so intimidating for so many people, but that when you really start to explore and get into it, not only will ultimately you be able to have a more successful business because you'll feel more comfortable having those money conversations, but your clinical work is also going to really deepen, because there's going to be this whole realm that is so meaningful and such an entry into the internal world of your client, that it's like we're exploring somebody's relationship to food, or exploring somebody's any other important relationship. And when we shy away from that, we miss this whole opportunity to really deepen the therapies. So I want to encourage people to feel more confident having some of those conversations, and having them be messy, and having them maybe be anxiety producing, and that can be okay. That's what happens. Right before growth, right? Is there some tension?
Absolutely. And there's a book that I want to recommend to you guys, and it's called The Energy of Money. And it was actually written by a psychologist, and I've actually read it twice. And there's a whole bunch of questions really examining a lot of that family of origin stuff for those of you who are really interested in this topic. And Kate and I will also put the link to our private practice calculator worksheet, fee calculator, which allows you to really kind of think through, like Deb was talking about, in regards to kind of planning backwards and that year to really help and support you guys. And Deb, I know that you have a giveaway for our audience today. What is that? Yeah,
also another downloadable about the 5 questions you need to ask yourself before talking about fees with clients, which is really more than 5 questions, but it is prompting a lot of this exploration of your own relationship with money and your own fears about business and what it means to be asking for money.
And a lot of business really is mindset stuff and really doing your own personal work. It's a huge percentage of being in business and being successful. So if you are needing to examine your relationship with money, I definitely would encourage you to utilize these resources. And we appreciate you being here today with us, Deb. We hope you guys join us next week as we talk to Michelle Hardman, talking about the referral network that's hiding right in plain sight.
Yes, and before we do that, let's hear from our Startup Nation superhero shout out for today's episode, which is by Emily Dungy. Emily says, I'm working on starting my private practice and just listening to the podcast. I'm so grateful that they have such great resources for clueless people like me. Emily, we're so glad you're finding our podcast to be useful. And it's kind of like, sometimes we need a private practice for dummies, right? Just like the Cliff Notes version and all the different topics and learning from all the mistakes that we've made along the way. So we're glad to hear that this has been valuable for you. And we wish you lots of practice building success. And for those of you who are wanting to have a topic that we haven't talked about yet, we're always open to providing the most value for you guys. So definitely let us know that via email, shoot us a message. And also, if you're loving this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, and share with your friends and fellow colleagues.
So Startup Nation, thank you for joining us on this podcast. Deb, thank you for sharing your knowledge and information and all about money, which is a topic I always love to talk about. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Have an awesome and inspired day, Startup Nation.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.